So joining us to break down this topic, both the technology and the human rights implications of CBDCs, are two people at the front lines of this conversation. We have Arsh Molu, who is the operations lead at the Human Rights Foundation. He's a very charming young gentleman who inspires me to do better at my own job. And we have Nick Anthony, who is the fellow with the Human Rights Foundation, and he's a policy analyst at the Cato Institute. Are you guys ready to talk CBDCs? Yeah, could get a bit dark in here. You ready for that on a Saturday morning? Good, good, fantastic. Okay, please welcome Arsh and Nick to the stage this morning. Welcome, guys.
Can we get a round of applause for the most prolific MC in Bitcoin? Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Nick, for being here. My name is Arsh. I help run the Financial Freedom Program at the Human Rights Foundation. Here I have Nick Anthony, who is a policy analyst at the Cato Institute, and he's also the lead author of Ahrefs' award-winning CBDC tracker. Before we dive deep into the nuances of CBDCs and how they're being deployed and where they're being deployed, could you first give us a brief introduction to what CBDCs even are?
Oh, yeah. Gosh, there's so much to say. You're kind of killing me with the brief part. But I think the shortest way to put this is CBDCs are an attempt by governments to regain the control and expand the control that they have over money. They've seen the rise of Bitcoin. They've seen the rise of alternative monies. And really, to put it shortly, they have a fear of missing out. They're worried by this, and they want to claw back the powers they had, and at the same time, they want to gain even bigger powers. So it's not just digital money in the sense of spending Bitcoin or even tapping a card or your phone. This is a direct line between you and the government, and that's a pretty big change for the world, especially with the work that we do at the Human Rights Foundation, seeing how autocracies and frankly, even democracies abuse the financial system. They use it as a tool of control to see what you're doing and to stop you. This unfortunately takes it to the next level.
Totally. So when you say they, right, let's get into which countries those are and the means of how they're even doing this.
Well, right now, the HRF CBDC tracker has over 145 different jurisdictions. The ones on the screen right now, those are just the autocracies. Those are just the worst of the controlling aspects of this. And you have the players that you might think of, like China and Russia, sure, but also you have other countries like the Bahamas and Jamaica that are pushing forward on this. It's really become a global effort of central bankers getting support from the International Monetary Fund, getting support from the Bank for International Settlements. They've been pushing forward on this now really heavily over the past really 6 years. It goes well beyond that, but that's like the biggest part of it. And maybe to simplify it a little bit though, because this is a lot to throw at you. It's 145 different countries, very different aspects of what it's like to live in each one of those. It's important to remember though that this is 3.3 billion people currently affected by this. This isn't hypothetical anymore. This isn't a what if or an academic paper that the Bank of Canada put out. This is 3.3 billion people live in jurisdictions where central bank digital currencies have been launched. And so this is something we really need to pay attention to.
Yeah, I mean, this is roughly 40% of the world's population. And the slide that you showed before this was, of the countries that are currently researching, deploying, piloting CBDCs, about a third of them or so are autocracies. We can jump to the next slide here where we actually look at the map. And this is, it's been 2 years since we launched this, but I still, occasionally fiddle with it. It's such a cool resource. What is this? Describe this for us, because we're seeing this map. Some of them are green, red, yellow. Some of them are blank. What is the methodology that went behind this?
Well, the first part of the methodology was actually kind of what you hinted at in the beginning. And while we're certainly biased, I encourage you all to check it out. I'll have a QR code in a minute, but it's hrf.org/CBDC tracker. And what Arsh was saying about he'll fiddle with it, that was one of the designs that we wanted with it, is having an interactive globe that, if nothing else, you just want to sit and spin the globe to see what's happening, something that would invite you to interact with it, rather than have a 245-page PDF that you need to pore over. So,
Which you already did for us.
which yes, I do that on the back end, but we wanted to make it easy to come into, easy to understand, because the last thing we needed was another acronym in this space and something that's too hard for anyone to understand when their civil liberties are at stake. And so what you can see on the map here is in green, those are the countries that are researching CBDCs. That can be anything from they wrote that 245-page paper to just they mentioned in an interview that this is something they're looking at. The yellow is they're piloting it. So that's in a closed experimental phase. They're testing the software, they're running simulations. And then the red is the launched, when it's actual real people on the ground are using the CBDC. Unfortunately, I'm not quite sure why, some central banks continue to call launch CBDCs pilots, even though they have 10,000 people using it, 100,000 people using it, maybe more than that. For us, if it's real people are affected by this, if it's real people have their livelihoods on the line, it is very much launched.
Yeah, and I know, many of us in the Bitcoin space have heard about CBDCs, and we know that China, Russia, Nigeria have been experimenting with it and have been deploying it. But the increasing demand of this cannot be underestimated, because we worked together to deploy this about 2 years ago now. And when it was first deployed, there was about 109 of the 193 central banks that were either piloting, deploying, or researching this. Now, fast forward only less than 24 months, that number is 145. So
yes.
that's dramatically increased. And we've all heard of this, but there's been kind of this gray area almost where how do you exactly know which countries or your country is even doing this, right? Because every central bank is different and they have different ways of doing this, right? So that's why the research behind this is so key. And that's why we have experts like yourself that will really delve into this and create this research in an interactive way. But when you open each one of these countries, what's some of the information that you can actually see? I'm sure there's links to different research and high-level information, right?
So one of the things that you'll find in there is just at the top, there's a snapshot of the country showing the bare minimum information to get you up to speed. What's the CBDC status? What's it like to live in that economy? How are civil liberties treated in this country? And then it breaks down into the history. And everything is linked. This is a little bit of a pet peeve of mine that unfortunately, a lot of news outlets these days don't cite their sources, which makes it very difficult for me to figure out what's going on. So I don't want to make it difficult for you. There's archived links, there's direct links, all to primary sources to make sure that you can see. Does something I say seem weird? You can check it. You can verify what's happening there. And part of that is also making sure that people aren't swamped with information either. Because we've been around the world now talking about this, and there's been so many times where government officials, not just citizens, but government officials have come up to us and said, I didn't know this was happening.
All the time.
I didn't know that my central bank was piloting this. I didn't know that they launched it. that is wild to me that they don't know this, because that means citizens probably have no idea. And it's so much harder to fight back against something when you're 10 years after it started, when you're 50 years after it started. And that's why it's so important that people have a tool that is easy to navigate, easy to get up to speed on, doesn't require a PhD in economics or accounting, and doesn't require you to be a government official to decipher. Because otherwise, we're going to be having this fight way too late.
And what are some of the overall patterns that you noticed while developing this? Like I said earlier, every central bank is different, from Nigeria to Angola to the Bahamas even. What are some of those patterns that really stood out to you?
I think there's two patterns. One is across the world, but one actually divides the world. So on dividing the world, autocracies are pushing forward the fastest. It's the authoritarians and the autocracies that want to have this now, and they want to use it clearly as a tool of control. And the part that unifies it all, though, is everywhere that it's been launched, it's just not being used. This is not solving a problem for anyone. This is not fixing the world. This is not saving lives. We have digital money that we can use today. We don't need central banks to intervene here and to introduce something or to prohibit what we're already using. And so whether it's China or the Bahamas, we see this common thread of just people aren't that interested. They want to use the tools that they already use, and they should be free to do so. Unfortunately, we talk about China as the authoritarian in this example, but even the Bahamas is feeling those authoritarian leanings, in that reflecting on how nobody's using it. The Bahamas announced that they're soon going to force banks to start using their CBDC, the sand dollar. This comes after years of struggling to get anyone to use it. And so the right answer should be, well, nobody's using it. We spent millions of dollars to make this. It really doesn't work that well. Maybe we should devote these resources to other things. Our people have problems that we can fix or we can help with. Maybe that's where the money should go. And instead it's, oh, okay, we're gonna force them to use it. That's really unfortunate.
Yeah, and I think that brings us to our next slide, where we've already recapped a lot of these points. But is there anything else that stood out to you on this slide?
Well, you kind of made this point already, but it is unfortunate that when we last did this talk, it was 127 other governments. Now it's 145. We really cannot understate the pace that this is taking. It's quickly spreading across the world. The good news is there is pushback. There are governments that are recognizing either this is not worth it or that their citizens don't want it. The United States is the most recent example of this, and others are following suit, but it still continues to spread across the globe. When we first started, like you mentioned, much of the map had nothing on it. Now, much of the map is covered.
And that sort of brings us to the next point of how Bitcoin plays into this, right? Maybe a hope of silver lining here, and the differences between those two. So maybe we can go and highlight some of these key points.
Yeah, I mean, I know I don't have to tell all of you this, that Bitcoin really is the opposite of a central bank digital currency. And frankly, whether you're looking at it from the perspective of Satoshi or the perspective of central banks, that's kind of by design. And that's kind of why so many people have found this as a lifeline, as an escape hatch from the current financial system. But it's also why CBDCs are not the answer. They are not freedom money. For all of these reasons, being a tool of censorship, being geofenced and highly programmable and requiring your identification to use it. It's really, and I cannot stress it enough, the polar opposite of everything Bitcoin stands for. And I see some central bankers try to say that, oh, well, we can hedge some of these issues. But then, even with that, even if you manage to hedge some of these issues, there's no way that they're going to fix everything just because of how politically impossible that is. I mean, just look at how some governments have targeted Bitcoin. And also to that end, why do we need that? Why do we need that if we have solutions today? If we have options today, I don't understand why this other step needs to be brought into the equation.
Yeah, and I think that brings it back to the point of Bitcoin. It's like why you're seeing they're just polar opposites, and that's why so many of the people in the room are advocating for Bitcoin. They're teaching Bitcoin. They're building on Bitcoin, and that's why us at HRF we're thrilled to actually get behind this and support open source projects and run educational initiatives and build projects like this, right? I have to ask, where do stablecoins fit into this? Because there's all sorts of different digital monies, from the tens of thousands of different crypto assets to Bitcoin to CBDCs to stablecoins. Where do you think they fit in here?
So where CBDCs and Bitcoin are polar opposites, stablecoins are kind of in the middle, kind of an awkward spot where stablecoins, and this varies depending on which specific stablecoin you're talking about, but in general, pulls from both sides. So this is centralized, not quite to the extent of being the central government, but it is centralized and it is more programmable. But at the same time, you can use it anywhere in the world. You can go, frankly, from one side to the other and be able to spend it. This is a private sector innovation. And this is something that is solving many of the problems that people are having. So it's kind of an awkward spot in the middle where it pulls from both sides. And maybe another way to put that is, to the extent that somebody is concerned about the risks of CBDCs, they get much worse when you go to the CBDC end, much worse when you go to that point. And to the same extent with, if somebody wants the freedom capabilities of Bitcoin, you get much more freedom when you move towards that. And so I wouldn't quite say it's a Goldilocks option, but it is something that's in the middle.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this is a good segue into what our beloved central bankers think about CBDCs. Like, do you think they're aware of the civil liberties risks that they may impose, or are they kind of too busy selling it as a upgrade almost to the current system?
I'm hesitant to say this, but this is one of my favorite parts about working on CBDCs. Coming from an economist point of view, I'm often trying to point people to understand how incentives shape our decision making, how incentives push us in one direction or the other. But here I can say, oh no, you don't even have to look at the incentives. Just look at exactly what central bankers are saying.
Word for word.
Word for word. They are saying specifically that, in this case, President Lagarde of the European Central Bank, that people want privacy. They want to have the privacy that cash offers, but that's not going to happen. Or with the BIS, the Bank for International Settlements, a now infamous quote, saying, yes, we will have the tools to control how people spend their money. We will have the technology to enforce that. Or now former governor of the Bank of Nigeria, Godwin Emefiele, saying, the goal is to go cashless. These are just 3 examples, but 3 very clear examples, and you can find countless others in the tracker where central bank officials are specifically and explicitly saying, we want to be able to surveil transactions more, we want to be able to control transactions more, we want to go cashless. And it doesn't end there. There's just a laundry list of fantasies that we've seen with this. And it really cannot be understated that this is exactly what they're saying, exactly how they're saying they want to build this out. This is not a made-up concern out of thin air or a misreading at this point. It is very clear what's happening.
And like I mentioned earlier, Bitcoiners are incredibly passionate about the subject of privacy and wanting our control back. Frankly, how can people get involved in this mission and really advocate against CBDCs?
Well, the simplest thing that everyone can do is just talk about it. This QR code will take you straight to hrf.org/CBDC tracker, and it'll show you what's happening in your country, your friend's country, your parents' country, or just everything around the world. Just talking about this and helping people understand that this is something that you're worried about makes all the difference. Because like I said before, the last thing we needed was another acronym in the economic or political space, let alone one that rhymed and most people associate with cannabis before they ever think of money. So just breaking the noise and getting people to understand this is something to be worried about makes all the difference, because we've seen too many cases of bad legislation happening and then it just sticks. You can have, in the United States, for example, the Bank Secrecy Act, which created the realm of financial surveillance and spread across the world. That's been on the books for 55 years now. The 55-year anniversary is this Sunday. At least I think yes, this Sunday. There have been people complaining for 55 years, and yet somehow it sticks. So we really need to get ahead of this.
Thank you, Nick. I think we have a few minutes for questions, if that's all right. Yeah, that's all right. We can do maybe a couple questions, yeah.
So any odds or ends, any questions in between, we can answer them all or at least point you in the right direction.
Can I ask you a one-word one as I walk to the back?
Please.
What's your favorite CBDC?
Oh, okay. I have to admit, the Bahamas, the sand dollar, is my favorite CBDC, only because of the name. The sand dollar is great. So we have the digital yuan in China, the digital ruble in Russia, the e-naira in Nigeria. Those names are awful. I'm sorry. I will give credit. The sand dollar branding, that was good.
Hi. My question is, what are some examples of the use of the evil CBDC in normal country? For example, I imagine in China with the social credit, somebody does some crime and then, I don't know, gets a limit, he can spend $50 a day or something like that for a month. But in the other countries I saw in the list, like Hungary and so on, do we have some examples of average Joe does something bad and then what happens? What do they block? I mean, what do they do? Thank you.
So you're right, in China, where the links are clearer. We haven't seen it rolled out fully in the EU, so it's hard to imagine where the Eurozone is going to go with it. But we can look at past examples of how accounts have been frozen because of either political opposition or people getting thrown into, unfortunately, the gray area of terrorism. That's a massive problem for the human rights community, where activists get thrown on those lists. And even in democracies, this happens. And unfortunately, one place where it happens that is especially heartbreaking is when authoritarians label people as terrorists. That carries over. A lot of times you might hear this described as like transnational repression. And so you can have life in a pretty good country, but you can be cut off from the financial system because of that. And where a CBDC gets involved is it shortens the time window and the distance for how that needs to happen. So instead of having to assign that, that title or that label and going through the banking system and going through their lawyers, it would automatically go through government to government, and then it would just be done at that. Yes?
Morning, thank you. This is really, really very useful. But I've heard, for example, directly from some officials of the Swiss National Bank that they're dealing purely with wholesale CBDCs for cross-border clearing, etc. BIS are involved, lots of people involved, the Fed. Do you distinguish between wholesale and non-wholesale at all on the tool?
Really good question. So for anyone that might not be familiar, there's a lot of different types of CBDC categories that have come up in recent years, but the three main ones you might hear of are retail. So that's what you think of probably of a CBDC, you're using it at the shops. Then intermediated, which instead of being directly you to the government, there's a bank in between. And then wholesale, where it's just for banks to use on the back end. That's them clearing and settling payments. So the tracker shows all three and some other forms as well. Where it does distinguish between it is when you click on the country, you'll see at the top that it's either a retail, wholesale, intermediated, or all of the above. And then also when you go into the history and development, that it'll explain clearly whenever there's a wholesale, intermediated, or retail CBDC. One reason that all of them are included is because it's easy to treat a wholesale as sort of a beta project. I mean, for this type of thing, there's no better test group, there's no better super user than the banks. And that's actually what some governments have outlined. They want to start with wholesale and then move their way down the chain. So there's less of a civil liberties concern when you're thinking of the wholesale level, where it's just on the back end, but it's something we wanted to have in there as well, just in case anything comes down the line further. Really good question.
I'm sorry, I think we might have to cut it there. Nick and Arsh will be here for the remainder of the day. You're here today?
Yes, yes.
So you can discuss your favorite CBDCs together. Please give Nick and Arsh a warm round of applause. Well done, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
And just one more time, the website is
hrf.org/CBDC tracker.
That's it. hrf.org/CBDC tracker. Check it out. Have a scroll around the world. It's good fun. It is
Thank you.
Fun.
Thank you.
Yeah. Cheers, Nick. Well done. Thank you. Thank you, Arsh.